And a very good evening to you, and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. David Hinds here with you. It's what, Wednesday evening? It's the middle of the week, and as uh, as we know, in Guyana, the news cycle moves very, very, very quickly. Tonight we're going to have the young ones on. Some people say the young salt of the earth. We are going to have relatively young people panel tonight. Um, Shurwayne Holder, the chairman of the People's National Congress, is on. Um, Randolph Critchlow, who you would know from the APNU AFC Live programs, member of the People's National Congress, and Tabitha Sarabo Halley will be joining us from the Nation Builders. They're not representing their party tonight. They are analysts in their own right, and we'll be talking about the recent political developments, how they see it from their perspectives. As you know, it's always good to get the young people's perspective. You hear that conversation of young people not being given much space to express their views on where Guyana is going. Um, and so we're going to offer that opportunity to get the youth perspective tonight. So please, we want a full house. We've been doing that. You all have been very good. Please share the link, share the link. Some of you have already started to do that. Um, whether you're joining us from Guyana, in Guyana, or the wider Caribbean, or South America, or the wider diaspora, North America, Europe, welcome to Politics 101. It's where you want to be at this time of the evening. Of course, once we are finished here, Kara Duncan comes on with Below the Belt, and then you have Mark Benchop um, uh, taking us out for the evening. So, welcome to Politics 101. Politics 101. What we do here, of course, is try to fill that niche where we get behind the news, we get views and perspectives from others. Um, of course, the host sometimes operate like a guest, but we mix it up here. Uh, so, welcome to Politics 101. We know the Quindon Bacchus issue is still live. Last night we had a hell of a show. We had members of the Justice for Quindon Bacchus Grassroots Committee on quite a moving program to hear the ladies really speak from the heart. It was rebroadcasted this morning on Buxtonian Morning Time. Lots of you have been asking me about YouTube. Yes, the program is seen right now on Politics 101 with Dr. Hinds YouTube channel. So those of you YouTubers, that's where you can get it. Some of you I know were accustomed to seeing the show on YouTube on the APNU AFC Live YouTube feed. There was an interruption to that coverage. I have to talk to the managers of that channel to try to get us back on there. But yes, we are on YouTube. We are on YouTube, and those of you who have been accustomed to seeing us on the APNU AFC Live, we're going to try to resume that. But for now, you can catch us on Politics 101 with Dr. David Hinds YouTube channel. We are on there. Of course, on Facebook here, You can catch us on Politics 101 Facebook page or CAMS TV or and CAMS TV. And I understand that sometimes Channel 9 would stream the program live. Sometimes they do a rebroadcast of the program, but I understand, especially during the week, they would stream live. As we carry it live here, they would be showing it live on Channel 9. So welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to helping us grow our program. As I say, look, it's in a couple of days, it will be 2 months since the PPP was elevated to office. And in those 2 years, a lot has happened. And I can tell you, as someone who studies politics, that had it not been for these shows, we might have been worse off than we are, because you have to have propaganda and education and communication in politics. Any political movement, any political organization without communication channels, you're in bad shape. And we have to say, for those of us on the opposition side, thanks to these shows, we have been able to keep our people informed, mobilized, and of course, the traditional media are now complaining. They're now complaining about social media. Well, look, we all were skeptical of social media. We all were concerned. But here we are at this moment, and that media, social media, have evolved. And insofar as the traditional media have not been doing their job, social media have been doing that job. And I think the problem is not with these platforms. The problem is with the traditional media themselves. And I always like to give the example of Golden Grove. Young Bacchus was murdered. The people of Golden Grove took to the streets. They were there every day. They have been there. And the traditional media never went there to talk to those people, to cover their resistance. It's as if it didn't exist. And it was social media that was covering those events in Golden Grove. So it was these shows who had to bring news of what's going on in Golden Grove and who had to give analysis of what's going on in Golden Grove. Because the traditional media was not giving news on what went on and what's going on the ground in Golden Grove. So when they charge social media and say, oh, social media are not trained, bona fide news organization, well, you are not covering some news. Who was covering Golden Grove? Who was doing investigative journalism in relation to Quindon Bacchus killing? Social media. Where was the investigative journalism by Stabrook News and Kaieteur News and Chronicle and Guyana Times? It was HGTV, out of BV. They were the only traditional media who had been covering what was happening on the ground in Golden Grove, who had been doing the investigative journalism into that murder. So when the traditional media complain about social media, they have to up their game. Social media are merely covering what the traditional media refuse to cover. I'm talking about the traditional media. The traditional media cover some things and they don't cover other things. And so insofar as the traditional media choose what to cover and what not to cover, then they're no different from social media. If social media is partisan, it is because the parties which this various social media influencers, as they call us, the parties which we support, do not get favorable coverage from the traditional media. I can tell you, the WPA sends out press releases. None of the 4 daily newspapers carries them. None, not one. Not Stabrook News, not Kaito News. Of course, not the Chronicle, not Guyana Times. It's these so-called social media that are covering them. The opposition parties met about, I think on Monday, at a joint opposition party meeting. They issued a press release, not carried by any of the daily newspapers. Not carried by any, not one. And then they complain about social media. If you are biased, if you choose not to cover some parties and some communities, then it is left to those on this those of us on programs like these to cover. I don't want to report on news. That's not the objective of this program. The objective of this program is to analyze the news, to get behind the news. But if the traditional media choose some news to cover and some news not to cover, then we have to break the news. The traditional media, when there was the march from Golden Grove, they weren't there walking with the marchers, only Sheriff Duncan. As soon as Golden Grove happened, not Golden Grove, Monrepo happened, the traditional media were there. They weren't walking with the marchers. If they were walking with the marchers, they would have known the objective of the marchers, and that the objective was not to go and interfere with people at Monrepo. So they came after Monrepo happened, and so that is why they report the news that protesters molested the people at Monrepo. If you were there in the first place, you would have known that the protesters didn't do anything like that. And then, of course, they covered Monrepo and went back to Georgetown. And when the police began to rain pellets and bullets and tear gas on the people of Golden Grove later in the night, traditional media were not there, except the BV TV station. And so therefore, they were not there to cover. They covered Monrepo, but they didn't cover Golden Grove. They're just like the president. He visited Monrepo, but not Golden Grove. The media, the independent media, visited Monrepo, but not Golden Grove. Biased coverage. And then you complain about social media. If you don't want to cover certain events, if you don't want to cover certain communities, if you don't want to cover certain parties, then we are going to cover them. And stop crying. Stop crying about who are certified journalists and not certified journalists. What did you do as far as investigative journalism into Quindam Bacchus? Had it not been for the people on the ground in Golden Grove, had it not been for Travis Chase and the TV station at BV, there would have been no investigative journalism. You come on the scene when you hear a cry, and then you use your pages to hammer one community. It is not that there were elements in the march that interfered with the people. In your pages, the protesters massacred people at one report. I'm tired of the media behaving as though some or the other, they're holier than thou. Opposition supporters buy more newspapers than government supporters, but you all give government more PPP, more coverage than opposition. I want you all to prove me wrong. Where do you sell your newspapers? Who listen to radio? It's opposition supporters. But yet you all were prepared to call them hooligans and to give them negative coverage. Get your act together. And I'm not talking about individual journalists, because news today in the traditional media is not driven by journalists. It's driven by the owners of the newspaper. And they're the ones who determine what gets into those newspapers. And then you leave the Press Association to scratch its head and complain about social media. Social media came into being to fill a void after the election of 2020. It's only now the opposition leader is given ample coverage, and in some instances, it's negative coverage. Negative coverage. The media chooses quote unquote third party or small party to give coverage. So here we are. On these programs, we are filling a void, and we are doing a service to Guyana. That even government supporters come on to these programs to get information. This is part of the struggle too. So, traditional media, stop lambasting social media and social media platforms. Come on here and see and hear what we are doing. We break news, analyze the news. We ask questions. Tonight I'm going to have young people on, and I'm going to ask them their views on the issues of the day. When last, any one of the newspapers ask the young people of the opposition side or on any side, what are their views? That's what we'll be doing tonight. And you all lie to your supporters that we're on air making mischief and preaching race and all that kind of stuff. But he has to preach race. We explain race. We explain racism. We expose racism. We don't preach race. We are only preaching violence. We're going to preach violence We don't control no police force. We don't control no army. We don't control no death squad. We don't control no phantom squad. That's where the violence is coming from. We don't control the treasury and decide who to squeeze economically and who not to squeeze economically. That's where the economic violence is coming from. We protect our people against the violence of the state. That's what we do on these programs. So we are here. We are doing our work because the moment calls for this kind of work. Maybe in another 2-3 years, some other media will take over. But for now, we have got to do our work. Welcome to Politics 101. My guest tonight, of course, young Randy Critchlow, young Shurwayne Holder, and young Tabitha Sarabo Halley. They are here in their individual capacity. They're not representing the party. All right? They're here to give that youth perspective. Mr. Critchlow.
Good evening, good evening.
Critchlow. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Happy to be here.
Long time.
Yes, sir. Too long.
Yes. How have you been doing?
Good in the circumstances under which we have to live in Guyana. Fairly good.
Yes. Well, you know, we have to be good in order to ensure that the struggle is prosecuted properly. Let me bring in young Shurwayne Holder. You know, ever since he was running for big office in the PNC, I developed a soft spot for him. Little baby face boy, lifting weight, be above his category, as they would say. But to assume one of the top leadership positions in one of the large parties is quite a feat. But tonight, like I said, I have you guys on in your individual capacity. Randy, since it's your first appearance, I'll allow you to take the new ball. Give us an assessment of where you think we are after 2 years of an imposed government.
Good night again. Good night to your viewers. And again, I'm happy to be here. Let me say, Dr. Hinds, that I have long said, after a year, the scorecard after a year didn't look good. And I've been one of the persons pointing to the strategies being employed by the PPP and our impending doom, if I can color it that way. You know, if I can color it that way, I believe, you know, as an observer, just as an observer, I know I'm involved in the political side of things, but as a citizen, as an observer, a lot of things don't make sense to me. I believe that we are heading down the road. You know, Trinidad was guilty of it. A lot of countries that got oil fell victim to it also. And I believe that the PPP, for all of their talk about the economists, so to speak, the economic wizards that apparently reside on that side of the aisle, have done a very poor job at getting the Guyanese people to feel any benefits after 2 years. And you know, everybody can see it. The layman can see it. And I don't know if this belief, where this economic model is or ideas are coming from, whether it's Ashni or whether it's Barrett, but this idea that we can run around to random communities and random groups of people and give them hampers and handouts, and somehow that is going to move the country and the people forward. It seems like such a preposterous plan at this point in time. We don't see any real movement in the economy. We don't see it. actually we see movement. We see movement of goods and services going up, prices going up, and the average man is still in the street suffering. And I'm bewildered at this point in time, right? Because I look around at Guyana and I'm saying the PPP has a golden opportunity. They were given this vehicle, given the keys. Actually, they were given it illegally. The keys to this vehicle with a full tank of gas, pun intended, a full tank of gas, and the opportunity and the potential for more gas to be added and stacked up over and over and over in the next 5 years. And they have decided that, you know what, we're not going to use this car properly, right? We're going to play the propaganda game. And I'm happy that you spoke about the importance of the new media earlier and the role we are playing online in showing Guyanese understand what the real story is, because traditional media isn't carrying it. But the PPP, as I said on my program the other night, they are very good at presenting a picture to you.
Thank you very much.
This rosy picture. So let me end my intro by saying that they have decided, you know what, they're going to play these games, but we're going to put up these propaganda pictures. And for me, as an observer, I don't see how that makes a lot of sense, and I feel we're in real trouble.
Thank you very much, my brother. And I like the term new media rather than social media. And I'm going to use that because that's exactly what is it? New media. You know, I'm a student of the Calypso. I teach courses on Calypso as political commentary. I teach at least 3 courses at the university. I teach on music, reggae, and Calypso as political commentary. And there's a 1989 Calypso that the mighty Chalk Dust won with. It was written 3 years after the National Alliance for Reconstruction won 33 of the 36 seats in Trinidad election. And he said, you know, we give them a maxi taxi with 33 drivers. And they start to swerve on the road and knock down people. And he concluded the driver can't drive. We give these a maxi taxi with how many? 34? 34 drivers. And then knock down everybody. As they go, they knock down the public servants.
Yep.
They knock down the fisher people.
Yep.
They knock down the teachers. They knock down the policemen. They knock down people who they think didn't vote for them. The Africanists will say they knock down black people and so on. They knock down some poor Indian people.
Yep.
And they start to serve. They end up on the American road, and even there, they knock down some Americans. Why? Because the driver can't drive. He got a man behind me, knocking his shoulder all the time. Go left, go right. He kept Mr. Soul telling me, slow down. He put his foot on the brakes when he should be accelerating, because he kept a man behind me. The driver can't drive.
It is an apt analogy. Very, very apt.
Sharon, your take on where we are after years.
Well, I'm glad. Good night again, Dr. Hinds, Randy, and your viewers. I'm glad tonight. I don't have the opportunity to sit as the chairman of the People's National Congress Reform, but rather as a young Guyanese citizen, onlooker just as you guys here. My take is that, you know, I fully agree with Randy's analysis. We have a political crisis in this country. We have an economic crisis in this country. We have widespread, what I would describe as widespread bad governance or total, absolute bad governance in this country. And I believe that people are now at a tipping point. And we in the opposition continue, we have a constituency first and foremost to represent. But I take it from my observation now over the last 2 years that this thing is affecting the entire country. The masses are affected currently. A lot of us, we come on and we say, well, we understand fully well what is happening in the Afro communities with the victimization and the discrimination, etc. But you get the sense now that it is more widespread at this point in 2022. It is so widespread that the entire country is now at a tipping point. I feel people are fed up, people are disgusted. Some persons would have, due to the political persuasion, due to other influences, some of them would have been convinced by the People's Progressive Party prior to 2020. But I believe 2 years down the road, people are now extremely dissatisfied, and not only dissatisfied, but they are at that breaking point. You reference the economy, and I think that that is the single most important issue to all Guyanese, every walk of life, across the racial divide, across the political divide, across every divide. It is the single most critical issue on the minds of Guyanese. The rice farmers in a crisis. We saw them protesting from Essequibo to Borbis. The fisher folks under severe pressure. They continue to complain about not having a good catch. And then on the other side, we have the government saying, well, no, in the 2022 budget, just go and check it. Their numbers are, in my view, falsified, because the fisher folks are saying that they're not getting catch, and the kind of catch that they had 3, 4 years, 5, 6 years ago, and the government of Guyana is saying something different. I looked at Ashley, the Minister of Finance, just recently rebuking the comments from the Bank of Guyana and the comments on social media and in the media that the cost of living might double. And he rushes out there without the understanding that people are really suffering. It doesn't matter, Dr. Hinds, whether it will double or the number, the figure itself doesn't matter. What people care about is that they're suffering at this point and they want relief. They want to hear something positive. They want to feel something positive, have a little hope. They don't want the politicians to come out and say, oh, that is not true. So in essence, people are really under pressure, and I hope that we can really dig down into this cost of living conversation as we go forward, because I think that it affects the entire country. And it is our task here to put the facts out there and to educate people and to let people understand what is really happening in this country.
Shurwayne Holder, chairman of the People's National Congress, but not speaking in that capacity tonight. And before that, Mr. Randolph Critchlow, who is known on this new media platform, one of the early pioneers, if you will. Some people say it's redundant, early and pioneer, but emphasis, he is one of the early pioneers of this kind of new media. Yes, the driver cannot drive. He managed to find himself, got lost on the Chinese road. He went on a one-way street and picked up Mr. Sue. And then, as he tried to find his way out, he picked up some undercover Chinese and brought them to Guyana. The driver cannot drive. driver cannot drive.
The issue is that he's not even the man that's supposed to be driving.
There
The
you
real
go.
driver in the passenger seat.
That's right. The man behind you in the passenger seat coughing is steady. Don't go down the Indian road there in Calcutta. Go down Shanghai road.
Don't go to Saudi Arabia. Go to China.
That's right. There you go. Randy, you are a regular person. You move around. You are seeing, you're hearing from people. We politicians, we deal a lot with slogans. We deal sometimes with numbers. What do you see? What impact this high cost of living, galloping cost of living, what impact is it having on ordinary poor people that you interact and observe?
Yeah, I don't know that we can really put into words, how this thing is affecting people. People are being pushed to various measures, various ends to make their ends meet, and it's sad. It is sad. The other day we saw manufacturers trying to meet the people's pocket when we saw this little bottle of oil being sold. That's the extent we've come to know. But the mindset of Guyanese is, I always say the Guyanese are resilient people. We're very resilient people, and I think that resilience sometimes bleeds over into apathy. Because we like to say, we can make ends meet. But I think we have reached a point, Dr. Hinds, where Guyanese are utterly fed up. When you go to the market and something that you were paying $50 for is now $100, and your salary has only gone up by $10, and you have to think about, sometimes I wonder how these families of 5, 6, 7 make it. I don't know how to put in words, but what I will say is that the people are slowly realizing that this PPP government is not looking out for them. They have decided that they will implement their macroeconomic policies, and those policies are geared to big business, big corporations, and like I always say, we will have big hotels, and the people who work at the hotels can't afford a room at that hotel. That is where we are. There is no effort on the part of this administration to move more people into the middle class. I don't see that happening anywhere. And if I can jump into this, I know I might be going off the topic here. I do not have a problem, and Shurwayne, you can add to this if you have any thoughts on this. I do not have a problem with cash transfer, so to speak. I know this is a ticklish issue, but it has to be a cash transfer that is substantial enough that will allow that person to do something with that money that will move them out of that state. At least potentially can move them out of that state. Go in and give somebody $100,000 or $25,000 or $30,000 is not going to do that, right? I have no problem as an economic model if you have structured, significant cash transfer to the people, because at the end of the day, we want to get what the resources of the country to the people. So I do not have a problem with it. What I do have a problem is the piecemeal ad hoc way that they're doing it, right? If the government says today, look, every 6 months, just throwing a figure out there, for the next 3 years, we're going to give $500,000 to each family. And again, just rough numbers I'm throwing out here. That $500,000 for a man who doesn't have a job could buy a motorcycle and he start a little delivery business. That $500,000 could buy some stock and he start a little shop. A $25,000 can do. You buy food for today, this week and next week you don't have any more food. And so essentially, I don't have a problem with it. But again, these are not the things that we are seeing. I'm sure, and I don't know if if you have an issue with that, but generally, I think that if we are to think about how to move people out of poverty, it has to be structured and it has to be substantial.
And before I bring Shurwayne in as a member of the party that proposed cash transfer, what the PPP is doing is not cash transfer.
Right.
They
That's
don't
not cash
call it
transfer.
cash transfer. They're
Right.
giving handouts. It's a form of buying votes, bribing people. We call it in political science clientelism. In the countryside, we call it a little freck. It is not cash transfer. Cash transfer means that it is a policy where government is transferring monies to household with conditions tied to school attendance of your children, tied to immunization and other healthcare issues, taking your children to the clinic often. Cash transfer is a policy, a global policy that has been signed off on by the United Nations, the IMF, and all the international agencies. What the PPP is doing is economic bribery by giving people something, not cash transfer. Anyhow, Shurwayne,
Yes.
your thoughts?
I was just about to echo your sentiments, Dr. Hinds. I do not believe that that is the definition of cash transfer, what the PPP seem to be doing. And you're on the point. It is actually vote buying. And we can examine the reasons for that, pending local government elections and a number of other things. And Randy is very, very on point too. I personally, and even at the party level, I can see I have no problem with cash transfer, cash transfer that is done in a very structured way, in a way which does not discriminate between different various groups, whether ethnic group or other groupings. I can agree with that. I can see a future government of which we would be a part of engaging in cash transfer. But there are a number of other things that the government needs to do. The cash transfer seem to be just a plaster on every sore. Every time there is an issue, you get this sporadic, this jerk of knee approach. We run out there and we just throw some money around, and that would quiet the situation down. But my view is that there are real problems in society, and unless we address the root cause of those problems, we will get nowhere with it. You will give a man $25,000 today, 50,000, 100, 150, 250, and after a month or so, you're right where you started. Take, for example, the sugar workers. They would have gotten $250,000 by Barajak View, who went in like a god and granted those $250,000. You go back there now. You go back there right now and see what is happening. See what is happening. High flood workers are striking. The fisher folks are still talking after getting $150,000. They are still complaining about their catch. It cannot solve these problems that we have, these deep-rooted problems. So there needs to be a different approach. I agree with cash grants in a structured way, but there needs to be a different approach. The opposition would have proposed a number of would have placed a number of proposals on the table, and they were all dismissed by the government because it didn't come from the government. They're not taking that time to listen to what the opposition has to say, what civil society has to say, what the common man on the ground has to say about it. They are very arrogant, very, I think that this oil money has really gotten to the heads of some of these politicians, and so they cannot see past This all they're seeing in front of them is this money and how they can use it to buy votes. We would have put forward a livable wage. And let me tell you this, Dr. Hinds, all of them were sitting in the parliament just a few months ago when we had a parliamentary session with persons that came from other parliamentary jurisdiction. And one of the things that they highlighted was livable wage in Canada. In Canada, the Canadians spoke about it. That is part of their program, and they dismissed it. They have dismissed it. We talk about the livable wage. We talk about increasing decreasing rather the tax threshold. We talk about various other measures. We talk about, look, fuel, for example. I was explaining this to the folks at the Anne Regina market just the other day, and they see reason with it. We said to them that we're getting a lot of money from oil. We were getting about what, $74 a barrel just last year. We're now getting much more than that. The difference there, you can look at it as to use it as a temporary relief to bring down the cost of fuel, bring down and once the cost of fuel affects cost of goods and services all over the country. That is not, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that. And so we thought that was a good measure to bring down the cost of fuel so that the cost of goods and services could come down, and so essentially the cost of living, you could get some relief. Jagneo dismissed it as cake shop economics. But when you examine countries like Mexico and other countries, and even non-oil countries, are doing the same thing as we speak. The Americans are looking at different ways how to bring down that cost at the pump. And so this government is showing its hand. It is showing that it is stubborn and it will only govern in a particular way. They will not, there is no inclusive governance in this country. We have such a universal problem across all regions, across all races, across all support bases. And yet they will not come to the table or allow opposition, civil society, and others who can contribute to solving this problem or to mitigate the effects, and allow them to come to that table to solve this problem. One last point I want to make at this time. I know you have lots of questions. I spoke with a government official and I said, what the hell y'all doing with this cost of living? Y'all taking a lot of blows. I was saying to them, frankly speaking, I say y'all taking a lot of blows and y'all seem to be doing nothing. The guy said to me, he said, you think we're the world government? We can control world prices? I said, you are correct. I said, you are correct. You're not the world government. You're the government of Guyana. It is what you campaign for. And if you cannot do the job, then resign. They should resign and allow those who have ideas and who are willing to listen to ideas and bring other people to the table to do the function, to do this work, and to solve this problem. That is as much as I can.
There you have it, some free advice from young Shurwayne Holder to the government. Any government that doesn't look after the welfare of its people is not fit to be in government. Your first act as a government is the welfare of the people. It's there in the Constitution. When a government does roads and a government looks after cost of living, those are basic things that government do. The apartheid government, if you went to South Africa, had some of the best infrastructure. The infrastructure was better, far better in the white communities. The point I am making is the function of government is to look after the welfare of its people. In Guyana, the government is discriminating when it comes to welfare. Their first act is to look after the welfare of the government, to prevent what's happening in Sri Lanka from happening to them. And the hypocrisy of some of the government support, they're cheering on what's happening in Sri Lanka. But if we were to do the same thing here, take to the street,
Hooligans.
saying, "Oh God, hooligans," and all kinds of things. It's the hypocrisy that the PPP has encouraged in this country. And it may be among their own supporters, but sometimes it seeps over to our support base. The kind of cynicism that they've encouraged in this country, we have a lot of repair work to do. Randy and Shurwayne, you all are young black men. You all are politicians and political, but you all are young black men. And you all live in this society. The young black man, Quindon Bacchus, was recently murdered. And you all know everything around that, so we don't have to go it over. I want you all to talk to us tonight as young black men. Your perspective on this whole business of Quindon Bacchus and extrajudicial killing of mainly young black men in this country. What's your perspective? What's your emotions? Please lay it out for us, starting with you, Randy.
Well, let me say that not only as a young black man, but a young father with a young black son, I see these things happening. And you know, we have said it over the years, and we've pointed out that it seems to happen more often under the PPP. And the question is, why? I'm sure the Guyanese have asked themselves, why is it that under this particular government, we see these things happening over and over? Over and over. I was at University of Guyana when we had the Yohanse Douglas issue, right? And from then, that's kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things in terms of how things happen in the society. One after the other, we've seen these extrajudicial killings. Not only of young black men, but older black men, you know, but we've seen it. And the question we have to ask, I ask myself, is it that I alone seeing this? You know, it is, for me, one of those things that it is hard to sit down and explain to your children. You put on the news and you see the Henry boys. You put on the news, you see, or in Boston, that I know is MP will know a lot about because that happened in his region. You put on the news, you see Quindon Bacchus, and all of these stories continue to happen. I am extremely concerned. I'm extremely concerned, and I am, you know, as a young Guyanese, frustrated, and I'm wondering when it is that we will figure out what is happening. So I mean, again, it is hard for me to put all of the emotions into it in terms of how this makes me feel, but we have to be concerned as a people, right? Shurwayne, I know that, you know, as a young person, as a politician, too, you have those questions and we have those questions, but where are we going? And the thing is, the most concerning thing for me is that these things always die down. They get covered down. You hear they gone to court, and then you hear the person, and they sort of cover up on the part of the Guyana police force and the government of the day. So it is a sad situation. Very, very sad situation, Shurwayne.
You come in and share with us your perspective on this very important question. And like I said, there's a reason I wanted you all to come on here this evening, not representing your party.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes party discipline can inhibit us from really speaking frankly. But insofar as you're able to speak, I mean, they're young African Guyanese men on this live. their girlfriends, their wives, their mothers are on this live. And they're asking themselves this question: what have they done that their sons can be treated like this in a country that their foreparents helped to make into a civilized space? What have they done that some of their sons are willing to look at their brothers and to shoot them for a mess of pottage, for a little something? What's going on?
Sure,
Shall
when
we
you know,
know them?
sure, when before you come in, I want to say this just to add this point. When we saw her in Boston, that really hit home for me because I felt like that could have been me in my bed 3 o'clock in the morning. What, there was nothing stopping that from being me. That could have been any black person in the bed. Police come in with this fancy story and shoot you in your bed. So that particular story for me was one that hit home, and we often said, you know what? Who's next? Who's next? Sure.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Hinds. I think the last point made by Randy was an excellent point. I recall the Oren Boston's case quite vividly. I was very early on the scene. I was called very early in the morning when it happened. And during that period, I can tell you, I was even concerned even for my own safety and the safety of other young black men within the community. Specifically in my area, you had the SWAT team staking out my home too, for whatever reason. I would have assumed that they were staking out my home. And it really begs the question, why as a people, you put it in a firm way, Dr. Hinds. Why as a people we have to go through this? What have we done as a people? Our foreparents came to this country as slaves and endured all that they had to endure over that long period of time. And when we are now to this point that we should be free as a people, and we should be reaping the rewards of the fruits and the benefits, from our foreparents. And sadly, we're still stuck. It is as if we're still under slavery in this country. We always have to look over our shoulders as young black men, and we always have to look over our shoulders, always have to be mindful of where we are. Some of us who would fortunately would be classified as intellectuals or had the opportunity to go to schools, top schools in the country and get an education. We constantly think that you've got to be careful where you would you would spend your leisure time, and certain times of the day. Don't find yourself in certain positions, because anything can happen. If you find yourself in certain particular groups, or you find yourself in certain communities at a certain time, you gotta wonder whether the police might just come and you might get caught up in that kind of thing. So that is for us as what I would say. I don't like referring to myself as intellectual, but those that would have gotten an education, and even those that don't, you can't underestimate the common people in the street with street sense. But you get in as a black youth, you're always thinking about the police and what might happen if you're in in a specific community or so. And that I had this kind of feeling growing up, going to President's College, passing through Buxton, you're a little tense. You're a little tense when you're there. If you had to stop in Buxton, you're a little tense because you always wonder if there would be a police shooting. That is my personal experience. And like Randy, I was at university when Johanse Douglas was gunned down. He used to play basketball, and I was a fan of basketball. I used to engage in that kind of sport at that time. And, I was shocked. I was horrified to know that this young man, a couple of them going home, and whatever happened at Cherry Street there, and then the subsequent cover up these statements for too long. We continue to see these statements, these falsified claims made by the police, and it continues. It continues in our communities, and you continue to ask yourself why. Now I am a parent, I am a father, and Quindon Bacchus, as I would have learned, I would have watched the videos. He would have had that his young child just visiting him there, and that was a moment for me, a real heart-wrenching moment to know that hours before he was with this little child. Now, what do you say to that child? What some of these youths coming up thereafter would develop hatred for the police, for example. And how do they continue in that society? I would assume that the mother would take away that child out from Golden Grove and go straight back out of Guyana. That seems to be the only logical solution, because definitely for black folks in this country especially, there is no justice. There is no justice across the board for the poor, but I would think that the black community are at a greater disadvantage. You always see it happening in black community, and as we speak here, I can guarantee you that in the next couple of months, there will be another case. There will be another case. You had Quindon Bacchus just a few weeks ago, and now you have this case at I think it's the Vigilance police station. Where does it end? Where does it end for the black community? And persons are race in this country is a very ticklish case. From the time you begin to explain these situations and you begin to be critical of certain players, you're deemed as racist. They would cut what I'm saying here tonight, or what you're saying here tonight, Mr. Hinds, and use it as propaganda, use it to fuel race hate in other constituencies. And it's a real problem in this country, and I don't think that there is a solution. I don't see a solution to this problem in the near future, on the horizon. In fact, we have rolled back. I thought that in the last couple of years we would have rolled back this tension that creates this kind of conditions, and roll back some of the. I think we did a lot of work in the area of policing. We did a lot of work in areas of race relations, and so we were not seeing this being very prevalent in the last few years while the APNU government was there. And that is, you have to ask yourself why were we not seeing this kind of behavior? Why is it that every time the PPP are in government, you see it? You go back to 2008, you will see it there. You go back to 2012, you will see it. You go back to 2014, there are prominent cases there that you can see. And it reached to a tipping point, this specific issue of violence, of discrimination, of extrajudicial killing happening in the black community, predominantly the black community. And it got to a point where people would have rebelled, people would have reacted, and it created more confusion in this country. It created an unstable society, an unsafe society for all in this country. And I don't know why is it that this government is allowing us to return to that state, Dr. Hinds. It is very worrying as a young Black person. It is very, very worrying to me, and as a father, it is very, very worrying.
Yeah. To that point, Dr. Hinds, before you come in, I want to say, I know Shurwayne said that he doesn't see a solution in the future. I have an interesting take. I believe that good governance goes a long way in dealing with race relations. You know, I believe that if the police force operates professionally and does their job, that goes a long way. Because a lot of these problems come from these extrajudicial killings and the fact that the police are not doing their jobs, and people feel as if, you know what, you're discriminating against me and you're not giving me justice. So good governance and overarching structure of good governance will go a far way. It might not solve it, but it will go a far way. Because I generally do not, you know, I often say to people, there is absolutely nothing wrong with voting for somebody that look like you. That I don't feel that there's a problem. Because you believe that this person that looks like you will take care of your interests. That is why, you know, for the for the 3 presidents of the United States were white males. Because the majority of the population feel like this person that looks like me will take care of my interests. Right? We have an issue in Guyana that we are split down almost down the middle demographically. So race and politics will always intermingle. But the issue is that when you are in government, you are expected to govern for everybody. And if you put good policies in place, things run as they should, it will go a far way to alleviate the fears and the feeling of inequity. And so I believe that we have to start there, good governance.
And good governance, and maybe young Holder is saying that he doesn't see good governance on the horizon. Maybe that is what
Especially on
because
I should have said under this government.
yeah, because
Under this government, because we went a long way towards moving in the right direction. I think all Guyanese will accept that.
yeah. Under the coalition government, I'm not the type of analyst who harp on what you did when you were in government and all, but I'm saying here emphatically that under the coalition government, we saved lives. You didn't have people coming, the police shooting you and burning you and those things. Yes. The coalition saves lives because it took human rights seriously. I think the problem is not so much the structure of the police force, but it is the human rights policy. If you train policemen and women that lives matter, lives are important, and that there will be a heavy price to pay if you take a civilian life.
Yeah.
I want to come in right here. Yes, looking what you're saying with what Randy was just saying. Now, we can go back to the Boston case. We can go back to cases before. If the police had handled Boston, we accept that it had already happened. But if they had handled it in a professional way, the way how it was, the investigations were supposed to be done, the SWAT team was there. You put all of them under arrest. You charge everybody. You investigate this thing thoroughly. You understand who gave the order, why the hell the SWAT team was there, and all these different things. Then you could have ascertained whether standing orders of the force, for example, were breached, and implement measures and say to the force in no uncertain terms, if there is a repeat of such. Right now, we will make an example of this these here, and so you send that message. You send a clear message. Probably Quindon Bacchus' life would have been saved, because that is the approach that you take. You send a strong message. But time and time again, we see this thing repeating. There is no look, nobody wants to do a proper investigation for whatever reason. everybody is covering somebody. Simply
That comes
put,
from the top.
everybody is
That comes
covering
from the top.
somebody.
Yeah.
And so this
That dysfunction.
corruption, and that's why I link Randy's point with
Mm,
bad governance and corruption. Look, we can trace back to 2020. Let us circle back. 2020, the PPP were installed into government. Shortly after, you had no other than the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Dr. Hinds, calling the police service commission and trying to coerce all the different fancy words you can use, get him to promote corrupt
yeah.
ranks, get him to promote ranks that were fingers were pointed to. And so it started there. This problem started there, and we would have, if you go back to the record, we would have been predicting these exact things will be the fruits of that you will reap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Political
so the
interference.
government, while I agree with you, Dr. Hyde, the political, correct, the political interference goes a long way. We still don't know in Boston's case, who were the intellectual authors. The president liked to use that term. Who were the intellectual authors? It was clear that the commissioner of police didn't know. The crime chief didn't know. But uh, the public is no wiser on this issue. All we know that due to pressure, the officer was charged for manslaughter. We don't even agree with the manslaughter. How did they arrive at that? Somebody
Mhm.
another civilian in some society will commit something in some fight, and you would see a murder charge being implemented. How is it that it ended up into a manslaughter charge? And so once they're doing these shady kind of business, and you have the police on the other hand issuing multiple statements that the evidence later down the line proved to be inaccurate, grossly inaccurate, but then there is no action taken. There is no action taken to those who issue that statement. They will be part and parcel of the problem.
Yeah.
And so it continues, Dr. Hines. It
Yeah,
continues.
and it's a convergence of a number of factors. There is a reason why under the PPP, Indian young boys are picked up, I'm sure, for all kinds of offenses. Why are they not being shot or burnt when they are in custody? Why, when young black men are picked up, they are shot and things? Why the police instinctively is more likely to harm a young black man than a young Indian man. We live in a society and we know where we would be penalized and where we would not be penalized. We know what to do when and what to do where. This business of extrajudicial is not an accident. It is part of the overall policy of the PPP. Control of the leadership of the police force, because the PPP is deathly afraid of young urban black males. Dr. Jagan said, I was in office, but not in power because I'm in Georgetown. The PPP, starting with under Jack Dew, has made it a policy that they will govern in urban Georgetown. And the way they will do that is that they will drive fear in the young urban men by killing them, making them examples. And they will co-opt the leadership of the party to do it through them. So as PPP members are saying, is a black man killing a black man? What do we have to do with it? That's the effect the PPP wants. They wanted to look, remember, Quinlan Bacchus, the first thing that was circulating, oh, the two boys had a problem with a girl and one shoot the other. We now know that is not true. They dropped that in the community. This is part of overall policy and approach. The PPP wants to be able to govern, and it sees the police, the army, young black males as areas that are problematic for them. And they're either trying to neutralize or try fairing that come. All we get that in our heads as analysts and political activists. We will be failing all over the place, looking for the reason. There is a reason it didn't happen under the coalition, under Bin. There is a reason. Did we see the soldiers on the road, on the Granger? No. Did we hear police burning or killing people on the Granger? No. Because the government did not have that as a policy. So it is government policy that arises out of the world view of the people who run government. They want to govern without the humble. And they look at people. They said, this target community will make it difficult for us. Now, Randy and myself and Sir Gerard and Mark and us, we are now part of a target group that is making it difficult for them to govern. So we are now part of the police, the army, and the young black male. You add us out of that. Because what we do every evening, every day, is making it difficult for them to govern. The traditional media don't investigate them, ask questions, every press release. We are saying here there were 3 other people on the scene. Why they were not charged? And we hammer it day in, day out. Our supporters hear it, their supporters hear it. Whether they move shady or they act decisively, the fact of the matter is that we are making them do it. For the first time in an extrajudicial thing, the police complaints authority made it public that in their investigation, they found ranks who said we were forced. You know who made them do it? We made them do it, not the traditional media. So, my brothers, more to stand in the way of tyrants. Governing, the more you become an endangered species. So that's why, Randy, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I was listening to Shurwayne speaking about how the issues are dealt with. And there's a clear difference, and you brought it up to us too. You find people from various races being picked up. Why is it that one particular race being tortured or killed? And we can make a comparison. We can look at, there was a young Indian guy killed in a police chase in Berbice area, right? That police officer, I think, was charged with murder. I can't if I'm correct, but it was swift. It was quick. The family felt as if they got justice, as opposed to what happened with Orange Boston, as opposed to what happened with many others. And so this is the inequity that we see. One particular group got to go on the road and block the streets in order to get some way, whilst another group, and we saw it again with what happened at Monrepo. We saw one woman joke that the president reached out to the house for egg ball and pillory. But the people at Golden Grove protesting for 2 weeks so that you can have some justice, some investigation, something. And so, the utterances of one Guyana is a laughable notion at this point in time. A very laughable notion, because we live in the real Guyana. We know what is happening. We're on the ground. We have eyes. The people of Guyana have eyes, and they are seeing also. So it is, coming back to where we started, this assessment of what is happening in the country. We are in really strange times. And I want to say this. I believe, and I looked at the interaction that you had with the president in Buxton, Dr. Hinds, and I saw his attitude. I saw the arrogance. I see it in Jack Dio, this air of invincibility, and but you know who I be. Yes. I believe that the PPP has they drink their own Kool-Aid. I believe that they have imbibed in the Kool-Aid, and they are all caught up in this arrogance. As Shurwayne said, the oil money, get everybody behaving shibbity. And so it has also seeped over to their supporters. And you see it in the comments. I'm sure if you go to the comments right now, you'll see the arrogance and we see it in people like Charles Ramson. They walk around and they believe that, you know what, they have inherited this office for life. And so there's this arrogance that they walk around and they continue to drink their own Kool-Aid. And this is why they don't understand or see what is happening with the people on the ground. I'm sure that Shurwayne, who is closer to them in Parliament, will kind of test that arrogance that I'm speaking of.
And so, Shurwayne, before I bring you in, I want to read a quote from a leading Indian columnist in the Guyana Times. Doesn't use his name, but we know who he is. He said the opposition troglodytes are kvetching and worse about President Ali extending compensation as compassion to those Indian Guyanese vendors at Monterey who had been robbed, beaten, arsoned, and terrorized by their justice marchers, who had come down like the wolf on the fold. And as what wolves do, wonder what would have happened if those wolves weren't imbued with the spirit of justice, rape of the Sabine women. This is from a leading activist. Let me tell people where one find that article. It's in the Guyana Times of July 9th, 2022. In the Guyana Times under eyewitness. And then he went on later and said, anyhow, their attacks have taken two prongs. First, the identity of the victims, and secondly, the source of the funds. Racial strife, of course, is what motivates the first objection. The president only helping his own, that none of those presumably not his own have been violated isn't mentioned. Then they want to know if due diligence was undertaken before the funds were handed over. That's like asking that tests be conducted to ensure that a person raped in full view of the public was actually raped before help is rendered. Rape twice by a leading columnist who's writing under pseudonym, but everybody knows who it is, and introduce the element of rape. That we black men, that we are rapists. So the next time we go on march, look out for rape. Look out for them hollering rape. It has been planted in the public domain. Planted in the, so my young brothers, we're not up against a normal government. We're up against a government with an agenda that is driven by things that they believe are so. We don't expect the ordinary coalition supporter to read the Guyana Times. So that is not meant for them. We know who read the Guyana Times. It's saying to Indian women, do like the minister in parliament. The next time there is shout rape, you see the pattern. And that's what I'm saying to you all young men and young women and young political people. There is a place for political correctness, but there is also a place for you to understand that things are regular. They want us not to talk race. They want us to talk class. They want us to be Marxist. They want us to be communists. But they don't want us to deal with real issues. The next thing they're going to pin on young black men is rape. It's there. Shurwayne, come in. Shurwayne?
Dr. Hinds, this is, yes, you can hear me?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
hearing you.
Oh, yes. I was getting you in and out there. What I
Okay.
got, I got in essence what you were saying and the column that you were referencing. This is nothing new from the People's Progressive Party, and it as a young black um, Afro Guyanese, it sicks me to the stomach. These types of comments really, really affect me personally. I have lots of
Yeah.
Indo-Guyanese friends, very, very close friends, even close family. And these things really, really get to me. I'm angry. I get that sense of that anger, that passion. As some people say, you get passion when you hear these absurd, this kind of absurdity, and it being plastered on a particular race. It certainly doesn't help our situation here. And for these guys to be preaching one Guyana with one corner of their mouth, and then in another corner they have these what you call it, these minions doing these kinds of work, and saying these kind of things at the bottom house meetings, and through the Guyana Times, and so it's just absolutely disgusting. I thought that in this in this new era of young people, of social media, of people being more educated, we would have moved past these types of behavior. I don't understand. We in the PNC will never tolerate this kind of loose talk, that kind of behavior, going out there and preaching this kind of thing. But unfortunately, I find that to be the policy of the People's Progressive Party. It's a policy position. Back in 2015, just a few years back, I would have done campaigning in a number of hinterland communities, and this is more widespread. These kind of loose language and this kind of talk is very, very widespread in the indigenous community. And when they get to these bottom house meetings within the hardcore Indo communities, this is what they preach. And I have people that come back and say to me, this is what so and so minister from within the PVP is saying. In the indigenous community, exactly what they said. They told them back in 2014 that if you make the PNC come in, they're gonna rob, the soldiers gonna kick down your door, they're gonna rob you, they're gonna rape your children, rape your girl children. They said to them that the PNC gonna take away. They understand the dynamics of the indigenous community, with that teenage pregnancy and single parent is very prevalent, and so they play on these situations, these social problems they have in these societies, and they go to them and they induce this kind of fear, and so you get them. I don't blame these people. They right away they go and they vote for the other side, because who wants their child to be raped? Who wants their child to be taken away? And so they associate it with black people. Frankly speaking, they associate these corns of society with the black community. What does that do for the one Guyana? This one Guyana mantra, this one Guyana policy that they're trying to bluff us with.
But
Dr. Hinds, this is something that really gets me in the gut.
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes. And you're being modest because one of your parents is Indian Guyanese, just in case the audience is wondering. Randy Critchlow, you have the last word tonight because we don't want to encroach too much on brother Sherrod
Yes.
below the belt before he hit us below the belt.
Yeah, I mean, I like to look forward with a positive mindset. I am not one to buy into the pessimism. I'm not a pessimistic person at all. I do believe that, like you said at the beginning, the work that we are doing on social media and new media and other forms of new media is making a difference. I believe that there are a few things that we have to do right come next elections and leading up to the elections. You know, a simple assessment of the numbers tell us that it is still a close game, despite what the PPP wants you to believe and want the impression they want to leave with you. You know, and maybe in another show we can talk about the actual numbers and the fact that we need to do a better job at getting our people from their homes to the polling station. There are too many people who stay home, right? And
Yes.
again, we can have a whole show on that. And I think that is something that gives me a lot of optimism. I believe that there are key things to be done. So to my people, to my Guyanese people, this burden of the PPP wouldn't be around for long. That's what I want to see. That's what
Thank
I
you
want
very
to
much. And Shurwayne, I definitely have to give you
Yes.
at least 1 minute to close out. Shurwayne, yes.
Yes, I will join. I will join with Randy. I want to join with Randy. You know, I understand, or rather, we fully understand the situation that Guyanese are faced with at this time. And as I said earlier, it is not while we are discussing the plight of mainly the Afro community. I dare say that the masses across every demographic, every race, religion is faced with this crisis. And I want to urge persons to, as Randy said, you got to stay focused, and you got to, they will tell you that God will only give you so much that you can bear. There is a saying that he will only give you so much that you can bear, and you know what to do. You know what obtained before this administration came to power, and everything is playing out the way it has to be played out. And so I would trust that Guyanese will learn from this experience, learn from the past, and learn from this current experience, and make more informed decisions when we get to that next stage, and don't be carried away by the mass propaganda and all these delightful promises. But look at the facts, look carefully, look at track record, and look at the things that really matter to you and the wider society, and make that important decision when that time comes around the next time.
Thank you very much, my brothers, and it's been quite a pleasure to share the stage tonight with the two of you young men. We don't belong to the same parties, but there are times when you have to get past parties and you have to deal with the issue. And I want this program to be an example of closing ranks when you need to. Transcending party barriers when you need to. I think it's a good example to the nation, and I think it gives our supporters a kind of comfort, knowing that their leaders are prepared to stand together in our common interest. Good night, and you all will hear from me again shortly.